Stan Gibilisco here, proprietor and operator of amateur radio station W1GV, Whiskey 1, Good Vibrations. I just thought I'd tell you a little story. Somebody remarked, one of the viewers, that they enjoy my stories, but I also have a question attached to that story, so I'd like your input. Back in the early 1970s, mid-1970s, I attended the University of Minnesota, Minneapolis campus, and we had a ham radio station, W0 Yankee Charlie, W0YC, the Gopher Radio Club. It was practically an unused station. I was almost the only person who operated that station. We had a 3-element Yagi on the roof and some dipoles strung up in the dormitory. And of course, we had our RFI problems with all of the residents of Pioneer Hall. Not all, but a lot of them, because we ran a kilowatt input, the maximum legal power level at that time, 1 kilowatt plate power input. And I don't believe that was peak envelope power either. That was 1 kilowatt was measured as either continuous power, like on CW, 1,000 watts, or for SSB, it would be peak envelope power. But I operated primarily CW, and I ran this kilowatt amplifier. It was a kind of a homebrew job, a job that we made, some of the members of the club had made years ago, and it ran, I forget what kinds of tubes, vacuum tubes it ran, or vacuum tube, maybe a pair of 813s or something like that. But in any case, it had a power supply that provided 3,700 volts direct current to the plate or plates of this or these tubes, okay? 3,700 volts DC, and there was an insulated wire that led from the power supply to the amplifier itself. One night I was working on this radio and I believe I had to tighten the connection between the DC power cord and the radio. And I figured I was safe because the wire had fairly thick insulation on it, and I didn't think I was in any danger. So I tightened this connection with my thumb and forefinger on the grounded outer screw-in portion of the connector, and all of a sudden, so I figured I'm just touching ground. I'm not going to get hurt, even if the wire had the voltage on it. As long as I stayed away from it, I'd be all right. But apparently I didn't stay far enough away from it, and apparently the insulation had aged enough to crack a little bit. And suddenly I heard this sound like a firecracker, and I felt this sensation like a firecracker, like a big firecracker, going off right in my, which hand is it now? I think I still have the scar. Let me check. I don't know if I can find, I think it's, yeah, my right hand, right here between my thumb and forefinger. There's a scar. That scar is from the shock, or more like an explosion of electric current or electrical current that went from this middle portion between my thumb and forefinger to my thumb and forefinger tips. And there was the spark apparently occurred where this scar now resides on my hand. So almost 40 years later, more than 40 years later, a long time. When I jumped and screamed, but I did not get nailed with voltage through my chest cavity. It only was confined to this little bit of my hand. If I had If it had gone through my chest cavity, for example, if I'd been barefoot on the concrete floor, very, very stupid thing to do. But I didn't make a habit out of going barefoot in Minnesota in the winter, so that was not a problem. If I'd had my other hand on some other on the ground and the shock had occurred in this hand, if the current had passed through my chest cavity, it very well may have killed me. As it was, it just felt like a firecracker exploding in my hand, and my hand was numb. And I was just horrified and scared half out of my wits, startled, scared. And when I looked down at my hand, I was actually surprised to see that the hand was even still there, fully intact. That's how violent that explosion was. But my hand was numb, and this little made a little blister where this scar now resides. It was a full 6 months before that wound completely healed because it was so deep and damaged so much tissue in my hand. To this day, I cannot feel any ill effects from that scar or that shock. It did not do permanent damage. I did have another medical condition that did do permanent damage, but that's a story for another video on a completely unrelated topic. Really lucky, and I learned a very important lesson about electricity. And if you want to derive your own conclusion for yourself, you can do that. I think the idea is stay away from any components that have that kind of voltage on them, no matter what. Power the supply down and make sure that the filter capacitors have completely discharged. If necessary, discharge them with a screwdriver in a well insulated handle or something like that. But make sure that you stay away, if you are a tube lover, stay away from those kinds of voltages when they're actually, don't run any risk. Okay, that's what I'm trying to tell you. Even if the wire is insulated, that doesn't mean that you can't get clobbered. And I got clobbered. I'm lucky to be here today, just because of the fact that it happened to be confined to one hand and didn't pass through my chest cavity. My question then for you, that's the story. That's the worst electrical shock I've ever had in my life. My question for you then, what's the worst electrical shock you've ever had in your life? Whether it be related to ham radio or not is irrelevant. You might have gotten it out of the AC outlet in your house. You might have gotten it from ham radio equipment. You might have gotten it from a large voltage battery or any other kind of source, or however bizarre. Describe and tell us all about, well, not all about, but just give a short description if you like. What's the worst electrical shock you ever had? Stan Jabalisco, W1GV, saying 73, which means best regards in ham radio jargon, and so long, which in ham radio language, the way I speak it, always translates to di-di-di-da-di-da. That's di-di-di-da-di-da.